Hey, good morning. Welcome to another edition of Morning Scone presented by Boudreaux's. Glad to have you with us. Of course, if you're going to be, as we near the weekend, if you're hanging out by the pool, check out the margarita mix. If you're brunching it, check out the Bloody Mary mix. Just shake, pour, and drink. Of course, you got to add your favorite libation. But we appreciate our friends at Boudreaux's for sponsoring Morning Scone. You can find it at great local retailers. In the Baton Rouge area, like Alexander's Highland Market, Calandro's, and Calvin's. So y'all check them out, please, and thank them for sponsoring Morning Scone. Okay, so if you know the drill, I'll go ahead and riff on a few things that I want to talk about, and then I'll get some of your questions. As always, if you don't mind, hit the share button at the bottom of this post. That helps me tremendously as we're kind of starting to build the audience here on Facebook Live, moving the show from YouTube. And if you're new and just finding us, do this every single morning. So holidays, weekends, all the good stuff. Spend about 10 minutes just riffing on today's sports headlines. So appreciate you for finding us. MLB Draft, 40 rounds in the books. So what a couple of days for Paul Mainieri and the LSU Baseball program. I'll do my best to succinctly try to explain this. I know we went through some of this yesterday, kind of explaining how the draft process works and why it was such a big deal for LSU, the way it all played out. And if some people still are wondering, I don't understand, like, why is it a good thing that these players dropped in the draft? Some just assume that because LSU didn't have a great year, these players dropped. The thing that I gotta stress is when it comes to the Major League Draft, teams draft based on two primary things. They draft on projectability and signability. Do you project this player to be good at the next level, and can we sign him? Those are the two things more than any other that Major League Baseball draft looks at. So you look at the guy like Zach Hess, who throws 97 miles an hour. Like, clearly he's a great prospect, and he's a top 100 prospect in Major League Baseball and MLB Pipeline and everywhere. And so he's a great prospect, young arm, all that stuff. The bigger question is, can you sign him? So he has a dollar amount that he wants. If teams are willing to pay it, someone will take him and they'll draft him. Those conversations are had before the draft. It's not like, I'll give you a counter example in football. If you remember Matt Barkley. Matt Barkley was a quarterback at Southern Cal. He was a projected top 5 pick as a junior. He decided to come back to school, didn't have a great year. Teams found out more about him, and then he slipped into like round 3 or round 4. It's not how this draft works. So with LSU and your Paul Mainieri, you kind of have to just kind of hold your breath, cross your fingers, and hope that you get lucky. And LSU got really lucky that some of their guys clearly had high price tags that teams weren't willing to pay. Not only high price tags, but leverage, being able to come back to school and still be underclassmen. That was certainly the case with Watson and Hess. So, man, I'll tell you, start to look at LSU's roster for next year, and the bigger issue that Paul Mainieri is going to have at this point, now that the draft is done, is figuring out how he makes all these guys fit into his roster. So, college baseball, you have a 35-man roster, 27 scholarship guys, 8 walk-ons. So, and the scholarship guys have to split 11.7 scholarships, and they have to get a minimum of 25%. So, Paul Mainieri and Alan Dunn and Nolan Cade are going to have to make all this work. So, again, as we were talking about this yesterday, I'm trying to remember exactly like how deep we got in for those that missed the show yesterday. But you're losing the 3 seniors, right? Bo Jordan, Nick Coombs, Austin Bain. At this point, Bryce Terang, the infielder who went 21st overall, you're assuming you're going to lose him. You're going to lose Levi Kelly as well, who went in the 8th round to Arizona. He's a right-handed pitcher. And you kind of knew all along you were going to lose Nick Bush, who went in round 8 to the Rockies. Okay, so those were the givens, guys that you knew that were going to be gone. When you look at that, and then the guys like the fact that Watson, Hess, Duplantis, all likely to return, and then a lot of the guys that maybe you weren't expecting to show up. A guy like Landon Marceau from Destrehan, a right-handed pitcher who passed on $1.5 million to sign with LSU. Jaden Hill, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year out of Arkansas, he didn't go until round 38. Cole Henry, who's out of Alabama, who's touched 97 on the gun, he also didn't go to round 38. Again, guys that just indicated they're coming to campus. They tweeted like, hey, I'm coming to be a Tiger. They had their number, they stuck to it, and they didn't get their number, so they're coming to campus. So now all of a sudden these guys that you weren't sure were going to show up are, and these underclassmen who you thought might go pro are coming back. So Paul Mainieri and his staff kind of have to find room on the roster for all of these guys. Just so bear with me. I'll try to run through some of this because what's got to happen now is you've got to have attrition. Okay, like some of the guys that were drafted that maybe you thought might come back, maybe they're going to be encouraged to sign, and maybe they're, because of what's coming in, they're going to be more willing to sign. Some of the signees that were on board with this class, maybe they don't have a spot anymore. It's going to be some of the guys that were on the roster this past year that maybe didn't play a key role, maybe they're not going to have a spot next year. These are conversations that really suck, and it's unfortunate that, if you're Paul Mainieri, you got to have these conversations and make these decisions. But this is why this whole draft process it sucks, because you just, until the process plays out, you just don't know what guys' decisions are going to be. So in some regard, you're walking blind. So we'll run through this. I'll go with the LSU players that were selected, and then the signees. Nick Bush, 8th round, fully expect him to sign. Cam Sanders went in round 12 to the Cubs. Cam was on my show yesterday and said point blank, there's not really a decision to make that he's going to sign. And if you're curious about Cam, in part the reason is because, look, if he comes back to LSU, there's no guarantee he's a starter. There's no guarantee he's an everyday bullpen guy. And his dad, Scott, was on the show earlier this week and made a great point. He said, look, if you get drafted, so he gets drafted by the Cubs, and you go play minor league ball, it's less about winning. It's more about putting the ball in your hand every 5th day, so you go pitch and get better, and they can start to groom you. If he comes back to LSU, the goal is winning. So if there's guys that are pitching better than he is, he's not going to get the ball, so he's not developing. So that's the benefit of going and getting into a farm system. Hunter Fiducia went in round 12 to the Dodgers, just 6-8 picks after Sanders went. I fully expect Hunter Fiducia to sign. And that's another reason where you go, well, he's a junior. He could come back and play his senior year. Why not come back and see if you can increase your draft stock? In large part because consider Fiducia lost his starting job to Nick Coombs this year. There's no guarantee that Fiducia is the everyday catcher for LSU next year. They've got 3 signees coming in, 2 JUCO guys, and then a freshman, C.J. Willis out of Ruston, who could all take that job from him. So then he comes back, he's a senior, he has no leverage, and if he doesn't start, then where is he? So he's better off taking $100,000 or whatever they might pay him to sign and going and getting into the farm system. He may be encouraged to sign. Jake Slaughter went in the 18th round. I would assume the very same for Jake Slaughter, that they're going to encourage Jake Slaughter to sign because, and he'd probably want to be 18th round of the Cubs, because if Slaughter comes back, he wasn't your everyday third baseman this year. And with Josh Smith coming back next year, there's no guarantee that Slaughter has an everyday spot on the infield. I guess it's plausible. Hal Hughes could go to the bench, Smith could play short, Slaughter could play third. But if you're Jake Slaughter, you're taking a big risk in that case, because you'd be a junior next year, and so you'd still have some leverage. But at the same time, if you don't play and you're not an everyday player, are you really helping boost your draft stock? So, that's something that Slaughter would have to consider. The last 3 guys taken, Antoine Duplantis went in the 19th round, Zach Hess went in the 34th round, and Zach Watson went in the 40th round. So understand, Duplantis wants a lot of money, and I don't think he's going to get it in round 19. It's possible that teams could cobble together a signing bonus if they have a lot of guys from rounds 11 to 40 that don't sign, and so they have enough money in their pool to be able to offer Duplantis the number he wants. It's just unlikely. It's happened before. This happened to LSU last year. They had a kid that was taken in round 30 who ended up getting $400K to sign. So that's one. Duplantis is the one that you might sweat out. But as a guy who loves LSU, who's got a chance to come back and be the career hits leader, who who could likely increase his draft stock, and if he hits for another year and plays a great defense, he could be a top 10 round guy and get the number he wants. Then Hess and Watson I fully expect to be back. I don't think that in rounds 34 and 40 teams are even going to touch their number, if provided they stick to their number. It's those are the types of picks where the Astros took Alex Bregman's little brother. These are the types of picks where, like, team in the past, Mike Vick got drafted late in the draft. These are the types of rounds where you're not expecting guys to translate, and so maybe sometimes you have some fun, or you take a shot on a guy. You take a Hess or a Watson just in case they decide that you know what, I don't want to go back to school. I'll take whatever you can give me. It's a long shot, but that's why you take them there. So that's it. I expect Duplantis, Hess, Watson all to be back on campus next year. Then as far as the signees, Turang and Levi Kelly, expect them to go. We'll see about Elijah Campbell. He's the outfielder, went in round 14 to Milwaukee. And that's really the only other one that should be on the fence. Giovanni DiGiacomo went in the 29th round. He's an outfielder. Easton McMurray's a left-hander who went to Colorado, went in round 37. Landon Marceau out of Destrehan, who's already said he's coming to campus. He was taken the 37th round by the Yankees. Cole Henry, that's the righty who throws 97. He went round 38 to Detroit. Jaden Hill's the righty who went in round 38 to St. Louis. And then I mentioned C.J. Willis, the catcher out of North Louisiana, went in round 39 to Tampa. Expect all of those guys to be on campus. So, you're Palmineri, and you start looking at the roster, and I think there's some sort of obvious casualties on the roster as you try to cut down. I think, as we mentioned, some of those guys like Bush, Sanders, Fiducia, Slaughter, I expect all of them to sign, but that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to look at your roster. And honestly, y'all, I'm really not comfortable like naming names of guys that I think aren't going to be back. But it feels some of them feel kind of obvious. Guys that that didn't play a big role and probably won't have a roster spot next year. And I expect that some of that attrition you're going to start to see happening already. So let's see. I'll see if I can see if I can get some of y'all's comments here. I'm scrolling through it now. So appreciate everybody who's watching. Let's see. Lance Richard said, Matt, where did the catcher from Ruston get drafted? Do you think he'll get him at LSU? Yeah. So that was C.J. Willis. Went in the 39th round. They got there's two other guys that LSU has signed, catchers that can play next year. And one of them's a JUCO kid who had 23 bombs this year. He can catch and play first base. Another is another JUCO kid who had initially signed with Louisville. They had to move around some money. He ended up not showing up when JUCO, got injured in JUCO, so his stock fell. I'm trying to see his name. Sorry, I don't have it here. Golly, I got it on my notes on my desk. But anyway, so yeah, they're looking good. I'd expect all three of those guys to show up on campus. I guess there's also a possibility that they could place certain guys, signees, in a JUCO and then get them to campus next year if they decide to go that route. So we'll see. Let's see. Stephen Miller said Easton is coming to LSU. So a lot of these guys go to Twitter and announce that they're coming. So that's good. Lance, what about Drew Bianco? Didn't hear anything about him. Drew Bianco did not get drafted, so that's good news. One thing that I'm curious, something else that happened yesterday, is Hal Hughes' dad got the head coaching job at Kansas State. I'm not telling you anything I know at all, but then it kind of stands to reason that maybe he'd see if his son wants to go join him at Kansas State in Manhattan, Kansas. Maybe not. Maybe Hal Hughes is completely content being at LSU and wants to continue being a Tiger, and that makes a lot of sense. But it would also make sense if he wanted to go play for his dad. And if with the roster crunch that LSU's facing, maybe he went and did that. Like I don't know. I'd love to think Hal Hughes comes back and goes through the fall. Goes through the summer and the fall, puts on some weight, starts to hit a little bit. Is a plus defender at short, and Then Josh Smith is back in your lineup at third, and your left side of your infield is an improved Hal Hughes and Josh Smith. And then on the right side, you got a senior Brant Broussard, and then one of those guys that I mentioned who's coming in who could go, stay on first base and hit you, 15, 20 jacks, which would be awesome if it happened that way. All right, if you got any more baseball questions or anything like that, fire away. There's one more thing that I want to talk about this morning. It was John Peterson. Did you see this story yesterday? So John Peterson is the former LSU golfer who was the national champion. He's a 3-time All-American. He won the individual national championship. And in 2012, he placed 4th in the U.S. Open at the Olympic Club and had a hole-in-one on the 12th hole at Olympic that year. I remember we had John Peterson on the show not long after that. I remember they did a charity auction. He auctioned off the shirt he was wearing that day when he hit the ace on the 12th when he finished at his top 4 finish. Well, he kind of looked like he was, he was on the way up, and he gave an interview to SI, which published yesterday, where he said, look, he's got 2 events left. He's got 2 more tournaments, the FedEx and the Travelers, to make $100,000 in prize money. And if he makes the money, he'll keep some status on the PGA Tour and he'll keep playing. And if he doesn't, then he's done. He's going to retire from golf at the age of 29. And Peterson said, quote, I just haven't liked professional golf. And he went on to talk about traveling 35 weeks out of the year. He said, quote, I never played golf as a kid to be a pro golfer. I played it because it was something my friends and I could do together, and I wanted to beat everybody. It wasn't ever about money. So, he's like, you turn pro, everything changed. And then the other thing that's changed in his life is that I think it was 6 months ago. Yeah. So 6 months ago, his son, his first child, was born. I think anybody that's a dad can relate, man. When kids come, things change. And he talked about, being gone and his son really only recognizing and wanting to be around his wife. And that, as his son's starting to recognize him, it's harder and harder to leave. And, man, I respect that tremendously. I respect someone who's self-aware and understands that family matters. And if you don't love doing something, then don't keep doing it. And even if it's professional golf and, traveling around and playing pristine courses and playing for $1 million every single week. If what the guy wants to do is be around his wife and his son, and he lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the article said that his dad is a father-in-law, is a real estate investment guy, and so Peterson could work for him in management and kind of be the not a bad dude on a business foursome out of some of those courses. So good for him. So John Peterson's got 2 more professional tournaments left over the next 2 weeks. If he makes $100,000, he gets to keep some status on the PGA Tour. And he said if he does, he'll keep playing. But if he doesn't, he's gonna walk away from golf at the age of 29. So wish former Tiger John Peterson well with all that. So all right, we'll wrap up this edition of Morning Scone. We appreciate you. By the way, Saints are back on the practice field today. So tomorrow's Morning Scone, we'll have an update from that. See how that all goes with the Saints, if there are any news and notes and tidbits coming out of Saints camp. And if we have any news and notes today about LSU baseball, by the way, on today's AFR, for those who catch the radio show every day, Landon Marceau, LSU signee, is set to join us, pitcher out of Destrehan. Mike Detillier will be with us full hour. We'll talk football. And Paul Maneri joins us today at 5 o'clock. So with the draft now in the rearview mirror, we'll talk to LSU's head coach Paul Maneri today at 5 o'clock Central Time. So please tune in to AFR today and every day from 3 to 6 Central. And thanks for watching Morning Scone. Remind you again about Boudreaux's. Check them out. Make sure you like them on all of the social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And label's really cool. Midas good. Just shake it, pour it, drink it. They got the margarita and Bloody Mary mix. Use a local product. Use Boudreaux's and I thank them certainly for supporting us here. So thanks again for watching Morning Scone, and we'll check in again with you mañana. Now we'll walk over here and turn it off.